I'm only going to be able to stay a few minutes. I've still got about 10 votes left, so we're probably here for another 2 or 3 hours, and I don't want to miss because you step off the dais and they take your toys. That's how this place works in the city of Miami.
So what we can do is we can go ahead and hear from you to start with, since you're here. And if you have time for a couple of questions, then you maybe can take them. Yes?
Of course. And
I'm going to do a really, really brief introduction of you, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So Ken Russell was raised in Miami, where he became a small businessman and an activist. In 2015, he was elected to the Miami Board of Commissioners and focused on issues such as affordable housing, sea level rise, and transit options. As a candidate for the U.S. Senate, Ken prioritizes reigniting Florida's economy, protecting water quality, restoring the Everglades, and raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Ken, take it away.
Thank you so much. So yes, I have been a city commissioner for 6 years now. Before that, however, all the way into my 40s, I had nothing to do with politics. I was a small business owner with a surfboard company and raising my family, my 2 daughters, my son who's 19, and my wife who's a Brazilian veterinarian. And that was my life until a contaminated park really took me out of that world and into the world of politics. I organized my neighborhood. I learned the science. I activated my community, and I went to City Hall and got our parks decontaminated. There were 6 contaminated parks in the city. And then I ran for office on an environmental platform, which turned into a social justice platform. I saw so many communities of need with huge disparities in our city. We needed police oversight. We needed affordable housing. We needed clean water. And this became my mission over this last 6 years. The biggest thing I've been missing, even though I've accomplished so many things at the city level, was a senator to work with me side by side. I don't care what your party is. We got problems in Florida that we need to solve, and they were absent. I've never met once either of my US senators in the city of Miami to say, how can we work together on infrastructure, storm surge, sea level rise, all of these big things where we need federal partnerships and matching dollars. So this is really what my goal is, to become for Florida what I wish I had for me. We have 67 counties, 412 municipalities, and I'm already visiting all of them to learn what their issues are on a hyper-local level and apply my learnings as a city commissioner to understand and know how I can best service all of your communities throughout Florida as a US Senator. So a little bit of my personal side, I speak 5 languages. I've traveled to over 50 countries for work. And I used to be a professional yo-yo player, the toy. And over the 10 years, I sold 20 million yo-yos. That's my crazy claim to fame as a professional yo-yo player. And during that time, I saw how other countries see our country. And I saw how our reputation as a global leader was slipping. And I really believe Florida's US Senator should be the leader for any administration in Washington on what happens in this hemisphere. The issues of Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, Haiti, all of the instability is where our diaspora here in Florida knows the story, the histories, and the best way forward more than any part of our country. And so I really want to be a big part of international relations as well. Marco Rubio has absolutely failed even his own Hispanic constituents. Cuban Americans are unhappy with him as he does nothing to reconnect them with families, send money home. He just continues to fight dead dictators instead of find solutions. He has turned his back on Venezuelan Americans and Venezuelans with temporary protected status. He wants them to be evicted and deported as soon as Maduro's gone, where they're here with families and jobs and paying taxes and getting an education and living the American dream. So I believe he has a lot of vulnerabilities as a Senate candidate this round. He's been in office for over 25 years, and it's time to go. I really believe you won't find a better Democrat than me, but what we need to beat a Republican statewide is a good Floridian. And I am working on Florida's issues from infrastructure to clean water, the Everglades, Lake Okeechobee, all these things, red tide, because they all affect not only our ecology, but our economy. So I will leave it with that. I'd love to meet all of you in person. I'm coming to Sarasota often. It's such an important county. the water quality issues you have, the affordable housing issues that you have. I really want to be there on a personal basis to meet with you and learn more and advocate in any way I can. So I'll take a couple questions, and I'm sorry, I got to run back into City Hall.
Ken, as a Latin American immigrant who suffered various kinds of U.S. intervention in my country of origin, bringing to the U.S. Senate someone who stands for the continuation of foreign policies of dominance, as opposed to the U.S. actually collaborating with other countries, is not something I could ever support. I have seen that you answered yes to supporting President Obama's move to lift the trade and the travel embargo on Cuba. I have also seen articles after the July 2021 protests in Cuba quoting you that supports for Cubans transcends political party and requires urgent responses from Washington. There's nothing about foreign policy on your senatorial campaign website, yet the US Senate has a big role on foreign policy making. Can you please clarify what kind of urgent responses you expected from Washington after the protests in Cuba in July 2021? And what is your position in regards to US relations to Cuba?
Thank you very much. It's a great question. It's a very complicated and big issue, and it can easily be misinterpreted. So the more we talk, the better our communication on the issue. And I'm open to evolving my positions and learning more. It's interesting, as I live in Miami and work with Cuban Americans here in politics, I found a very different point of view from when I travel and meet with Cuban Americans in Tampa, for example. The positions on embargo and on engagement seem to be different even regionally in Florida. My goal is that America should not be dictating to the other countries in our hemisphere how they should stabilize, how they should find their path to democracy. America should be here as a support system to an entire hemisphere coalition of like-minded countries that believe in freedom and democracy, that encourage and find the right mechanisms to create the pressures and possibilities that when countries like Cuba right now are at an inflection point when there's regime changes that have been happening, where there are artists and residents that are being persecuted today that are rising up and saying, we want our freedom. I believe that we should be there. We cannot be absent. I'm not saying invade. I'm not saying engage in some aggressive way. And I'm not saying lift the embargo without condition. We need to hold positions where unequivocally Cuba needs to provide free elections, a free press, a free economy. And even though they may never, or in this brief lifetime or generation, move to what we would recognize as full democracy, I believe there is an appetite for a shift in their governing system from their volition, not by force, not by international pressure in some hostile way, but I believe from the pressure of the people and the support of an entire hemisphere, not led by the United States, but joined by the United States. I believe there is potential for change in government and access to freedom for Cubans.
And Commissioner, I hate to interrupt you, but I have to pull you to get you back to your commission business.
If I could just finish, though, it's really important. My father, I'm not Hispanic, I'm Japanese American. And my father, who is an American who was working in Cuba for 10 years during the 1950s, he was evicted from the country when Castro arrived. He lost everything there. They seized his assets, his money, his business, and he was kicked out of the country. He later served as a halfway house for exiles who were coming to Miami to help them make it into our country as they came here. I lived in Venezuela for a short time in 1992 when the memories were much different than what they are now. And I would love to return to Venezuela. I would love to see Cuba someday, but in a freer way than they are now. And so these things are important to me, but I do understand the clumsy and heavy-handed actions that the U.S. has taken in the past should not be repeated. We should learn from our mistakes and work as a coalition. So I hope I've explained myself a little better in terms of those international policies.
And do you have time for a question on domestic issues?
Yes, I do. Because my staff is telling me what they're talking about on the dais, and right now it's peacocks. So I can miss a discussion on peacocks.
Right here in Sarasota, it was named the worst area in the entire nation for the highest 50% in 1 year rent increases on average. Housing is totally unaffordable. Florida law restricts rent control. but an emergency in Norton's can happen. I'm just wondering if you have some solutions for what can be done on rent, out of control rents and out of control home costs to even purchase a house.
Robin, thank you for that question. This has become one of my most important issues. The Miami Herald called me a housing advocate because Miami, you may have the record on the biggest jump, but Miami has the record as the least affordable city in the entire country, where people spend more of their income on their rent or mortgage than anywhere else in the country by percentage. We have more people spending more than 30% of their income, and more people spending 50% or more of their income on their housing costs. It's got to change, and it's only getting worse right now as the markets go up and Florida continues to be attractive to new investment and the technology industry. We're seeing housing prices skyrocket. As a city commissioner in Miami, I've passed tons of legislation regarding affordable housing and created new funds without any help from the federal government and without raising taxes. And I found a way to even parse through the preemptions on rent control to create the state's first ever inclusionary zoning. So in the city of Miami, I created a zoning transect for inclusionary zoning, where every new tower that goes up in that area, they get additional square footage and additional floors in exchange for 15% of their units having to be controlled. The rents are capped at workforce levels. And so this is not rent control. It seems like it, but it bypasses all the illegal definitions of rent control because it's not done on the shoulders of the developer. It's done with a carrot and stick incentive program, but it is mandatory. So it's worked. There's been 4 towers built with thousands of units over the last 4 years while I've been in office under this zoning ordinance. And again, no help from HUD, no help from the federal government. And in fact, the HUD rules need amending. And when I get to the Senate, I really want to work on the housing, the money that's provided to the states and cities for housing, because it's really done in a clumsy way. I would rather create my own fund in Miami, as I've done, instead of using the federal money, because of all the strings attached that break up families and neighborhoods when you use the HUD money and follow their rules. I'm trying to hold neighborhoods together. And so I created a $100 million general obligation bond in the city of Miami. I took it to my voters. They voted overwhelmingly yes. And without raising taxes, I created $100 million that we are now using as a city without federal strings attached. We're buying land for affordable housing. We're subsidizing development and rents for affordable housing. And then we're using our tools of zoning. And it's just so important that as we improve our cities, we do it for the residents who live here now instead of driving them out. And I know it's happening throughout the state. This is a very big issue for me, and I can't wait to work on it.
I actually had the pleasure of seeing you at the steps of the Manatee County.
I'm sorry, my affordable housing item is up. I have to go. I have to run. Okay. If I can join back in, I will. Thank you so much,
Thanks.
guys.
And go ahead, Johannes, you have a question.
Yes, I wanted to jump in onto the issue of affordable housing. Congratulations on getting that passed in Miami. My question is related to the cities in Florida that are rather horizontal and vertical. I think the underlying issue of land value is much bigger in smaller cities like Sarasota. And one of the ideas that has been tossed around is land banking. That could be land banking at the hands of city and county. It would be about buying up available land, leasing that at a low cost to home builders, possibly developers, but in most cases here in Sarasota, it would probably be single family. And my question to you is, for land banking, could there be some kind of federal support?
Yes, I love the initiative. I was not able to find consensus on my commission to do it. There was much too interest in them controlling the land, my fellow commissioners, then they would be willing to put it in a trust to anybody else. And so it's a great concept, though, that I would like to explore more. And I would love to see it encouraged at the federal level to create the right incentives so that land banking and land trusts can become a more accessible and usable thing. Fort Lauderdale's had really good success with it in Broward County. And I've explored the concept here, but it gave too much power away from the commissioners here who like to control things, and so it wasn't successful, at least not yet. But yes, I'm interested in that very much.
So Ken, I was interested in your focus on clean energy, and I wanted you to, if you can, please be a little bit more detailed on what you intend. What are your proposals?
This again is about the lack of parties to be able to communicate on something that we absolutely must address, and it gets lost. And so what I found in the city of Miami, that if I talk about plumbing instead of polar bears, I can get what I need out of my fellow commissioners, because they see the sea level rise issues. They see the water in the streets, even on a sunny day, where it's backing up on a king tide into our streets. We know we have to address this from a plumbing perspective. And so I could not find any help from the federal government. So I created a general obligation bond for $200 million for addressing storm surge, sea level rise, and the actual physical mitigation of what we're looking at in terms of these problems. And now we're utilizing that. We're doing big projects for, keeping the water out of our streets, et cetera. But the more important thing is to look at the cause and to be on the right side of our future for our children, to make sure we're mitigating climate change and our carbon footprint. So I passed a few ordinances here. First, we declared a climate emergency in the city of Miami. Second, we set a goal of reaching carbon neutral by 2050. And third, I passed an ordinance which is the most aggressive in Florida of any city, where there's over 1,000 towers in the city of Miami, and they now all have to every year measure their efficiency for electricity and water usage based on their square footage and how much gallons and how many gallons and kilowatts they use. And then every 3 years, or every 3 years, they have to retune, meaning they have to invest in those properties to improve their efficiency score. You can't imagine how hard that was to pass on a predominantly conservative, property rights focused commission, but we got it done. And now the city is on path to reduce our carbon footprint. Again, no help from the federal government. This is something that shouldn't be tackled city by city. This is something that we should be incentivizing on a national level. And that's absolutely my goal, to be at the forefront of the climate conversation.
I want to continue with climate. The president's agenda, very ambitious, Build Back Better, would have included a lot of measures that would have responded to climate change. My question is more about the financial mechanisms behind that agenda. Some Democrats actually gutted the taxation mechanisms that would have funded this ambitious program. It would have been taxation on the wealthy. It would have been increased taxation on corporations. So my question to you is, what is your stance in regard to taxing the wealthy and taxing corporations?
Yes, I think what we do and what we say are things that we must set goals for what we want to do. We must say it in a way that it can get passed. And the words tax the rich, while they are correct, I guarantee you, if we're not careful, that will be this year's defund the police. This is one of those rhetorical tools which has good intention, but it is easy target for Republican attacks, which make us look either out of touch or too aggressive. We know we need to be aggressive. We absolutely must bring equity to our tax scale, so that the top producers are paying their fair share. If they're able to capture all of that profit yet not pay any taxes, there is an inequity there that must be addressed. Yet when you say tax the rich, even the blue collar worker feels like that's some sort of attack on success or capitalism. And it's unfortunate, because it is true. It is what we should do. But how you package that, how you sell that, and how you gain consensus is where the Democrats fell short. And that's why they were not able to pass Build Back Better, or even find consensus among themselves. We need to be aggressive. We need to be progressive. And we need to prioritize this issue. I'm really worried, because even though they're looking at that as a loss for Biden, and voting rights as a loss for Biden, and the filibuster as a loss for Biden, he did achieve not only a good infrastructure bill and the good American Rescue Plan. However, he's not getting credit for it. You know who's taking credit for both of those? The Republicans in my community who are receiving those funds and spending it for our residents. So the Democratic Party, unfortunately, has failed on message to capitalize on their wins and to achieve further wins. And it'll be very hard for us as Democrats to even achieve anything else leading into the midterms of consequence, and anything else even leading into the next presidential legislatively. And that's very, very unfortunate. My big worry is that because of this dissatisfaction right now, even from Democrats with our own Congress, it's going to be very hard for Washington-based Democrats to be successful in these midterms right now. I really believe this is the moment for outsiders with strong positions that are appealing to the issues of their state. It's not about campaigning on January 6th right now, even though God knows it's the existential issues of our democracy, and it should never happen again. But to win in Florida statewide, we need to be talking to Democrats and then tackling Florida's issues like water quality, storm surge, sea level rise, affordable housing to win this state. It's a shame, and I'm being very honest with you all, that the inside baseball of politics right now is very difficult for Florida. People think we're not a blue state anymore. We really are. There's a lot of progressive values in this state. We see it in the ballot initiatives. But in order to win Florida, you have to be, let me put it this way. I'm not saying go to the center. I'm not saying, in fact, the opposite. I'm not saying dilute your Democrat identity. I'm not saying be less of a Democrat. I'm saying be more of a Floridian. Hold your democratic values. Be super progressive. Put good initiatives out there, but campaign on being a Floridian, and we can get there, because all of Florida knows we have to solve these issues, whether it's climate, whether it's affordability. And even the majority of Floridians recognize there's inequities in our tax code, but the way it's sold to them is really important. And my experience here in Miami with my conservative commission, yet still getting all of my legislation done, has been a training ground for me. So I'm ready. I'm ready to go up to DC and deliver on big progressive policies in a way that brings everyone on board.
As far as the climate change energy issue, there's some legislation that's in Congress right now that has been tested in British Columbia. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau wants to do it throughout Canada. It's a program that can be described as the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. It's not a tax. And I don't want to try to take your time up right now, but I'll send some information to you, Micah, so that people can, it's not widely known about, but it's got Republican and Democratic support building up in Congress. It's not a tax, so it doesn't have that stigma attached to it. So
thank you, Brad. I'm very interested. And Liam's on here too, so he's going to take some notes so we can do a little research, but I'm happy to weigh in on that later.
I really want to thank you, Ken, for taking your time.
I'll just finish by saying that I'm visiting all 67 counties. I believe the only way to win Florida is to understand Florida. I'm not going to these counties to tell them what I'm going to do. I'm going to learn what your hyper-local issues are and where the federal government is failing you, and building a campaign around these communities as I travel. I've raised over $1 million so far from small dollar donations and folks who really believe in me. We're really gaining momentum. I just reached I don't know if you guys are into this, but 50,000 follower on TikTok. This crazy platform with funny dance videos is getting super political, and it's taking message right to Florida voters. And they're getting so engaged. It's a whole army of people who are ready to volunteer and get the message out. So we're having a great time, and I hope to earn your support. But please, whatever you feel, whoever you support, please follow along, because we're going to have a great time. So it's at kenrussellforflorida.com, and all of the social medias. You can just look up Ken for Florida or Ken Russell for Florida. You'll find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and of course, TikTok, my favorite now.
Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you so much. Muchísimas gracias a todos ustedes. Muito prazer. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all of you guys. You're doing the hard work that's going to save this party in Florida as a local caucus. You can't count on Washington. The DNC is not going to save us. we as Florida Democrats have to save this state. And I really thank you for all the work you guys do.